way before we had silicon chips, and long before anyone was even using the term artificial intelligence, two scientists published a paper. It was super dense, full of math, and it was trying to do something absolutely wild: describe how our thoughts work using the cold, hard rules of logic. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this 1943 paper that, decades ahead of its time, quietly laid out the blueprint for our entire digital world.
Okay, so this is the huge question at the heart of it all, the one that McCulloch and Walter Pitts were trying to answer. And they weren't trying to answer it with philosophy, but with math. They looked at the brain, this messy biological web of cells, and asked a simple question: is there a logical principle under all that chaos? I mean, could you actually break down thinking into a series of simple calculations?
So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to follow their exact path, piece by piece. We'll start with their main argument, then we'll zoom right in on their model of a single brain cell, a neuron. From there, we'll see how they built these amazing networks of thought, how they added the magic of memory, and then finally, we'll get into the incredible legacy this one single document left behind.
All right, first up, their central idea. This was a really revolutionary claim, one that basically built a bridge between the messy world of biology and the clean, perfect world of logic.
Okay, this sentence right here, this is the key to the whole thing. See, propositional logic, that's the language of true and false, of and, or, and not. What McCulloch and Pitts were saying is that the brain wasn't some kind of unknowable magical thing. Nope. They argued that its most basic operations could be described with the same precision as a mathematical proof. Think about how wild that was at the time.
So to build this huge argument, they had to start small, really small, with the brain's smallest component, the neuron. But here's the thing, they weren't interested in all the messy biological details. They needed a clean, simple, idealized version, a logical neuron. They built their entire theory on this one simple fact of biology. A neuron doesn't fire a little bit or a whole lot. It either hits its trigger point and sends a full, complete signal, or it does nothing at all. It's all or it's none. Does that sound familiar? It should. It's a binary system, right? It's just a switch. It's either on or off. And this is the brilliant leap they made. This is the bridge they built between biology and logic. If a neuron firing is the same as a logical statement being true, and a silent neuron is the same as it being false, then suddenly you can use the entire toolkit of mathematics and logic to describe what's happening in the brain. Okay, so to make this model work, they had to simplify things. They set up 5 basic rules for their neuron. 1, it's all or none, on or off. 2, it needs a certain number of yes votes from other neurons to fire. 3, the only time delay that matters is the tiny gap between neurons. 4, some connections can act like a veto, completely stopping it from firing. And 5, for now, let's just assume the wiring doesn't change. These simple rules were the foundation they needed to build something huge. So a single neuron is basically just a switch. Kind of boring. But what happens when you start wiring these switches together? Well, that's where the real magic starts. That's how you turn simple on-off signals into something that looks a lot like thinking. Let's walk through a super simple example. Imagine a neuron, we'll call it C, and it needs 2 signals at the same time to fire, so its threshold is 2. Now, if only neuron A fires, C does nothing. False. If only neuron B fires, C still does nothing. False. But if A and B fire at the exact same time, C gets the 2 inputs it needs, and bam, it fires. True. They just built an AND gate, a basic building block of every single digital computer out of their theoretical neurons. And look, this wasn't just some clever party trick. They realized that by wiring these neurons together in different ways, they could create networks that could perform any logical function you can think of, and, or, not, you name it. And if you can do that, well, you can build a device that can compute anything that is computable. What they had just done was draw up a blueprint for a computer made out of brain cells. Mind-blowing, right? But hold on. A brain does more than just calculate. It has memory. It works with information over time. How could their fixed static network possibly do that? The answer was just brilliant in its simplicity. It all came down to how you wire the thing. Seriously, just think about that for a second. What if you wire things up so that when a neuron fires, its signal can loop all the way back around and help trigger itself again? You'd create a circle, a feedback loop. And this was their next huge insight. See, with a loop, a signal doesn't just pass through the network and vanish. It can get caught, kept alive, reverberating, like an echo bouncing around a room. And that echo, that's a piece of the past that's still alive in the present.
And that reverberating signal, that's memory. That's how the network can hold on to a piece of information, like a 1 instead of a 0, for a little while. So now the network's behavior isn't just about what's happening right now, it's also about what just happened. This was the giant conceptual leap they needed to start modeling things like sequential thought and short-term memory.
Now you gotta remember, this was a totally theoretical paper. All math, no experiments, no hardware. And yet, its impact was just enormous. It shaped the future of technology in ways that McCulloch and Pitts could have only dreamed of.
I mean, you can literally draw a straight line from this paper in 1943 to the smartphone in your hand right now. The very first generation of AI researchers were directly inspired by this idea of a brain that computes. The artificial neural networks that power so much of our modern machine learning, they are the direct, undisputed descendants of these simple, logical neuron models.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, the impact is just staggering. This one paper did 4 incredible things. It gave us the theoretical blueprint for a digital computer. It laid the foundation for the entire field of AI. It made it okay to study the mind as if it were a machine. And on top of all that, it proved their neural nets could, in theory, compute anything any other computer could.
And I want to leave you with this one last quote from their conclusion because it's pretty stunning. Their ultimate goal wasn't just to build a cool machine, it was to understand the human mind. They believed that if thought is just a form of computation, then maybe even disorders of thought, mental illnesses, could one day be understood not as some kind of moral failing, but as a flaw in the network, a bug in the code, a problem that, in theory, could one day be solved.